They laughed when I said I would learn programming at the age of 50, not just one person, but many, from old colleagues to even a few family members. They told me, "You're too old for that, why bother?" Some of them laughed right in front of me. One even joked, "Evan, are you planning to create a second Facebook?" 5 years later, I was the one sitting at the head of the interview table, looking straight at them, those who once laughed at me, and asking, "Why should I hire you?" Before we begin today's story, if you enjoy healing and inspiring stories like this one, don't forget to subscribe to the channel so you don't miss the emotional journeys we have coming up. Each subscription is a huge encouragement for us to continue bringing you stories that touch the heart. Thank you for being here. Now, I invite you to step into my story, a journey that began with a laugh. I once thought my life would just coast along until retirement. I had lived in Seattle almost my entire life. The city, with its drizzly, misty roads, the whispering pine trees, and the soft yellow lights from old cafes, was the place I called home. I worked at a large insurance company downtown. It wasn't a high-ranking position, but it was stable. Almost 25 years in the same office, in front of the same window overlooking the street below, every morning. I would park near the building, walk past my regular bagel shop, grab an Americano and a sandwich. My routine hardly ever changed, but I didn't mind. Because to me, stability was a kind of happiness. I was grateful I didn't have to fight like others. I had a steady job, a warm family, and a life that wasn't rich but fulfilling. We lived in a small house in Renton, a quiet suburb about 40 minutes from downtown. The house was small but cozy. There was a wooden porch where Julia had planted flowers by hand, and a set of chairs in the backyard where I would read on weekends. Julia and I got married when I was 26. We had our ups and downs, but our love remained strong. Our 2 children, Emma and Caleb, were grown now. Emma was studying medicine in Portland, and Caleb was working as a software engineer in San Jose. When they came home for holidays, the whole house would light up. The laughter, the smell of baked goods, Christmas music from the old speakers, it made me feel that my life was truly complete. I once thought that if I could keep things like this for another 15 years, I would have enough saved up to retire, take a road trip with Julia across the country, visit our kids, then return to live peacefully in that little house. I didn't dream of wealth or fame. What I dreamed of was a life that was enough to make me smile every morning when I woke up, and I thought I had that. I wasn't prepared for any major changes. I had no backup plan. I wasn't learning any new skills, because I truly believed that as long as I didn't make any big mistakes, everything would just continue as it was, until one winter morning. It was just another regular morning. But it began a completely new chapter, one I had never imagined, not even once. That morning, the weather in Seattle was colder than usual. The wind howled through the tall glass buildings, and the raindrops fell like needles on my car's windshield. I remember waking up earlier than usual. Julia was still asleep, her hair gently spread out on the pillow. I quietly closed the door and left the house without waking her. The familiar coffee shop on Pike Street was already lit up. The short-haired barista smiled when she saw me walk in, just like every other day. I ordered my usual hot Americano. I had no idea that would be the last coffee I would drink on my way to work. When I arrived at the office, I noticed something was off. No one said anything, but everyone seemed to be holding something back. I walked to my desk, booted up my computer, checked my email, and then I saw the subject line that made my heart tighten. Please come to meeting room B, 10th floor, 9:30 a.m., no reason. No details. Just a short, cold line. I tried to guess, maybe it was a personnel update, a new project, or an emergency meeting, but part of me knew something was wrong. At 9:25, I stood in front of the glass door to meeting room B. My hand touched the doorknob, then paused for a moment. I took a deep breath and walked in. Inside, the HR director was sitting next to my department head. Both of them looked at me with expressions I had never seen before, a mix of sympathy and distance. "Hello, Evan. Thanks for coming," the HR director began. "We'll get straight to the point." I sat down, feeling my heartbeat slow. "The company is undergoing restructuring. Your department is on the cut list. This decision has been approved by the board of directors." I sat there quietly, hearing each word fall like stones from above. Restructuring. Layoffs. Approval. I heard them, but I didn't truly understand. Or maybe, I didn't want to. "We truly appreciate your 25 years of service, and will offer a compensation package," they continued in a flat tone, as though they had said this to dozens of others before me. I looked down at the stack of papers pushed toward me. Inside was my resignation letter, the severance policy, a few pre-printed thank you notes. Everything had been prepared ahead of time. I was just another name on a long list. I don't know how long I sat there. I don't know what anyone said after that. I just remember, when I stood up to leave the room, my department head tried to extend his hand for a handshake. I shook his hand, like a robot. No emotion. No anger. No sadness, just emptiness. I left the building without looking back. I didn't say goodbye to my colleagues. I didn't stop by my desk for the last time. I walked straight to the parking lot, gripping the papers in my hand in the rain. The sky was gray, the clouds thick. The rain fell steadily, as though the sky itself wanted to collapse with me. I sat in my car for a while. I didn't start the engine. I just sat there, staring at the steering wheel, as though waiting for someone to appear, tap me on the shoulder and say, "It was just a joke." But no one came, no one said anything, just the sound of the wind howling through the glass, and the cold truth growing louder in my head. I had lost my job. At 50, and I had no plan for it. I drove through the streets of Seattle, the rain pouring down. The whole city seemed to be drowning in gray, sorrowful hues. The other cars moved slowly, just like me, no one in a hurry, as if we were all trapped in an endless storm. I glanced through the foggy window, but could barely make out anything other than streaks of rain. My mind was in chaos, thoughts swirling around, unable to break free. I didn't know what to do next. Losing my job at 50, that was something I had never thought about, never imagined could happen to me. The feeling was hollow and suffocating. I knew I had to talk to Julia, my wife, but deep down I didn't know where to start. How could I explain to her that I had lost everything we had built together over all these years? How could I tell her that everything we thought would be stable had collapsed in an instant? On the drive home, all I could hear was the rain hitting the windshield and the sluggish hum of the engine, like a sad song. I could clearly feel every beat of my heart, steady yet filled with worry and fear. I knew today wasn't just another ordinary day. It was a milestone. A milestone I wasn't prepared for. When I got home, it was still raining. I looked at my little house, a place where I had always felt peace, safe. But today, it didn't feel like that anymore. I stepped inside, took off my soaked raincoat, trying not to make any noise. Julia was standing in the kitchen, her back to me. She hadn't noticed I was home. I stood there for a moment, unsure of what to say. Every word felt stuck in my throat. "Sweetheart, I need to talk to you," I spoke quietly. My voice sounded like a stranger's. She turned around, smiling softly. just like every other day. But as soon as she looked into my eyes, her smile faded. "What's wrong?" Julia asked, her voice tinged with worry, and then I said it. The words I had been trying to avoid all day: I got fired. In that moment, everything seemed to freeze. No words, no questions. Just silence, and Julia's gaze. A gaze that held no anger, only confusion and bewilderment. She didn't say anything, just walked up to me and placed her hand on my shoulder, as if to say, "We'll get through this together." I didn't cry. Not immediately. But the sense of loss, the disappointment, the fear about the future, it all came crashing down on me. I felt like a failure, like I had missed my chance to protect my family, to protect our future. Julia didn't blame me. She was silent, listening, waiting. I started to tell her the details of what happened. The meeting, the decision I couldn't change. It felt like I was recounting a story from another world, not mine. "You're going to be okay, Evan. We'll get through this together." Julia just said that, but those words were like a tranquilizer. She didn't look at me with disappointment. She looked at me with trust. We sat down together, no need to say much. Just silence, letting the sorrow settle, feeling each other's presence in this scary moment. Things might change, but our love would never change. I knew the future wouldn't be easy. But at least I had Julia. And no matter where life took me, I knew I could find comfort in moments with her. After that day, everything started changing too quickly. I never imagined that one day, at the age of 50, I would become unemployed. It felt like my life was falling freely, unprepared. I still remember the early days after being fired. I felt like I wasn't myself anymore. Everything became blurry, like a thick fog that clouded everything ahead of me. Every day, I woke up a little later, no longer woken up by the alarm. Julia had already started work early, and I didn't have anywhere to go anymore. At first, I tried to fill my time with reading the news, checking emails, and even cooking meals I had never made before. But none of these activities could fill the emptiness inside. Normally, I worked in a busy environment: office work, meetings, deadlines, partners, clients. Everything always had a goal, a plan. But now, I was just a man sitting by a cold cup of coffee in the kitchen, staring out the window in silence. I didn't want to bother Julia because she was busy with work and taking care of the family. But I couldn't hide the growing feeling of disappointment and confusion inside. I began to feel like a burden, not just to her but to myself. The unspoken questions kept swirling in my mind every day: what will I do next? Can I start over? And then, I found myself sitting for hours in the little kitchen. Alone, watching the raindrops fall on the window. The ideas, the plans I had built for my life now seemed meaningless. I began to realize that I had been too safe in my life, and now, it had changed completely. Time passed, and I applied for jobs everywhere. But no one responded. Every company I sent my resume to was looking for younger candidates, people with the latest skills, those who understood technology that I had neglected for years. I didn't blame them. The job market was changing, and I no longer belonged to the world I had once been a part of. One morning, after submitting a new batch of job applications, I realized I had spent the entire morning with a cold cup of coffee. I hadn't done anything. I just sat there, staring at the computer screen. Every second felt like a part of my life had been left behind. A feeling of helplessness started to rise, and then, a question hit me, like a cold reminder: why not do something different? I realized that if I didn't do something to change, I would forever remain stuck in this vicious cycle, unemployed, without purpose, without hope, and I decided I couldn't continue like this. No matter how hard it might be, no matter what was waiting for me ahead, I had to find a way to change. At that moment, I didn't know where to begin. But I knew that as long as I took that first step, no matter how small, it would be a start. After making the decision, I knew I had to do something to change my current situation. I couldn't just sit there feeling useless. I started searching for other jobs, hoping to find another opportunity. But I never expected it to be this difficult. Every morning, I woke up, sat at my computer, and began applying for jobs. I couldn't even remember how many resumes I had sent or how many hours I had spent on this. I followed all the instructions, optimized my resume, wrote cover letters with the most professional words I could. But the result was always the same: cold rejection emails. Notifications saying they found a more suitable candidate. Even though I had prepared myself for it, I still couldn't help but feel hurt each time I received a rejection. "We appreciate your interest in our company, but we are not currently hiring for this position." That was the content I read over and over again for an entire week. Each word felt like a knife cutting into my self-esteem. I used to be someone with a solid position, a stable job. Now, I was a 50-year-old man with nothing but a resume full of gaps. The skills I had were outdated in a world of technology changing every day. The companies I applied to were looking for young, dynamic people with the skills I hadn't updated in years. The frustration kept growing, but I didn't allow myself to give up. I knew I couldn't keep falling into this endless cycle. But the thought of starting over from scratch left me confused. How could I start again when so much time had passed? How could I catch up with the younger generation, who had the modern knowledge and skills that I didn't understand? But then I remembered something: I had once had a stable career. I had been successful because I never gave up. Just because of a few small failures, I wouldn't give up easily now. I had something that young people didn't have: experience. Life experience, work experience, and most importantly, the ability to overcome difficulties. One morning, while I was reading an article about learning programming for beginners, I realized something. Maybe this was my opportunity. Programming, a new skill I could learn, regardless of age, regardless of where I started. And I asked myself, why not try? I began looking into online programming courses. I didn't know how far I would go, but I decided to try. If I didn't try, I would never know what I was capable of. And if I could learn, if I could change, would have a new opportunity. Things might be tough, but I knew that if I didn't start somewhere, I would forever be stuck in the past. The next day, I signed up for my first programming course. Even though I didn't know what programming was, I felt a surge of hope. No more sitting in the cold kitchen waiting for an opportunity that would never come. This time, I would create an opportunity for myself. I didn't know what would happen next, but one thing I was sure of was that I had taken the first step, and that was the most important thing. When I began learning programming, feelings of insecurity and self-doubt constantly plagued me. Every time I looked at the computer screen, the lines of code seemed like an alien language to me. I couldn't understand why others were picking it up so quickly. Every small step forward felt like I was trying to climb a high mountain without seeing the summit. Every day, I sat down at my computer, studying each lesson. Sometimes, I had to watch a piece of code over and over again, dozens of times, still not understanding it. The feeling of failure kept swirling in my head. I wondered if I could actually do this. Could I still have the strength to learn something new? These questions made me feel like I was sinking into a quagmire. There were times when I wondered if I had any value left. Every time I sent in a job application and received a rejection letter, I questioned myself. Could I really start over? Could I change my fate, now that I had missed so many opportunities in life? But then, one day, as I was sitting reading through a programming lesson, a thought flashed through my mind. It was a thought I had forgotten long ago. I remembered a time when I was working at an insurance company, and I had met a new person in the field. He had said, "We don't learn to be perfect, but to improve every day." At that time, I had just smiled and brushed it off, but now I realized that that very saying had changed the way I looked at the learning process. Maybe I wouldn't be good right away. Maybe I would have to go through many failures. But I didn't need to be perfect. I just needed to get a little better every day. And then, someday, I would be capable of doing things I once thought were impossible. I started to see failures not as the end, but as part of the learning process. The times I didn't understand, the times I wrote the wrong code, were all opportunities for me to learn, improve, and grow. And more importantly, I realized that in life, it's never too late to start again. No matter your age, we can still learn, we can still change. Gradually, the feelings of insecurity and self-doubt began to fade. Small successes, like finishing a coding assignment or understanding an algorithm, brought me joy. Each small step forward made me feel like I was gradually regaining my confidence. And I knew that I still had value. Not because I had achieved great accomplishments, but because I dared to stand up. Dared to change, and dared to keep trying no matter how difficult things got. I no longer asked myself if I had value. Instead, I began asking, what will I do next? And that's the question that's guiding me through this journey, even though I don't know what the outcome will be. But at least I know I'm going in the right direction. I've started again, and that's the most important thing. One winter afternoon, when the rain had stopped falling and the sunlight was slowly fading, I decided to take a walk near Union Lake. Seattle often experiences rainy days, but today, there was a rare glimpse of light sneaking through the clouds. I needed a quiet space to shake off the tension. It was at that moment that I realized, sometimes when life feels stuck, simply changing the environment can make everything seem a little brighter. As I wandered through the small streets, I unknowingly passed by a cafe where a group of students were gathered in a corner inside. They were focused on their computer screens, deep in discussion, their laptops displaying lines of code that I couldn't understand. What surprised me was their enthusiasm. They weren't just casually studying, their eyes were filled with passion, as if they were immersed in a world I had never understood. One of the students noticed me, smiled, greeted me cheerfully, and then went back to their work. This scene made me pause for a moment. I wasn't sure why, but a thought suddenly crossed my mind. Could I do that? Could I start over, learn something new, just like them? Looking at them, I didn't just see youthful faces, but a sense of zeal for what they were doing. Programming, a word I had only heard before, something I thought was meant for young people with brilliant, creative minds. But now, I wondered, why not me? I continued walking, but that thought kept echoing in my mind. Could I learn programming? Could I change my life? Was learning programming the path I was looking for to make a significant change in my life? When I got home, I couldn't stop thinking about the scene with those students. Why did I feel such a powerful surge of energy? Was it because I saw freedom in them? Or because I realized that if I wanted to change, I had to do something different? I'm not young anymore, but I knew that if I didn't try, I would live with regret. I turned on my computer and typed "Learn Programming" into Google. The results were full of free online courses, books, and video tutorials. It was a world I had never known. I began reading and browsing through some materials, but my first feeling was confusion. Terms like Python, JavaScript, HTML, CSS seemed like an entirely foreign language to me. But then, I realized something: I didn't need to understand everything right away. The important thing was to start. I asked myself, why not give it a try? Could I do it? If I don't try, I'll never know the answer. If I just sit there and worry about things that haven't happened yet, I'll never be able to change my life. I had nothing to lose, and maybe this was the only opportunity one had. At that moment, my feeling was determination. I didn't know where learning programming would lead me, but at least I could say I had dared to try. It was an important decision, and I knew that from that moment on, I was on a completely new journey. The next morning, I woke up with a different feeling. I was no longer the man sitting at home unemployed every day. I was someone starting a new journey, even though I didn't know where it would lead. I signed up for a free Python course on a well-known website. Although I didn't understand anything about programming, I felt an odd curiosity. Curious about what I could learn, curious about what I could achieve. Each lesson made me feel like I was learning from scratch. The first lines of Python code were as incomprehensible as strange writing to me. But I decided to persist. I didn't know what I would do with this knowledge, but I knew one thing: I couldn't stop halfway. Even though it was difficult, even when I felt like giving up, I kept going. When I got to the third lesson, I began to understand how to print the phrase "Hello World" on the screen. Although it was a small step, I felt an indescribable pride. It felt like I had conquered a small part of the programming world, and that was an important beginning. Every day I learned a little more. Even though I didn't understand everything, I began to feel like I was making progress. A week later, when I met a few old friends at a coffee shop, I told them about learning programming. I could see the surprise in their eyes, and then they burst out laughing. "Evan, are you becoming a hacker?" A joke, but to me, it wasn't funny at all. In fact, I didn't know what I would do with this knowledge, but I was sure I was doing something I had never tried before. I had always done stable jobs throughout my life, but now I was diving into a completely new, challenging field. My old friends still didn't understand, and maybe they would never understand until I proved that I could do it, but instead of feeling ashamed or frustrated, I felt alive again. Every day I learned something new, and every day I felt a little closer to something greater. For me, the phrase "Hello World" wasn't just a simple programming lesson. It was a reminder of what I could accomplish if I persevered. I no longer felt embarrassed about learning programming. In fact, I felt like I was coming back to life, like someone who had found the light at the end of a dark tunnel. The moments of typing on the keyboard, the long lines of code, became rewards whenever I understood something new. The feeling whenever the computer printed that phrase, even though simple, was an important milestone for a big change in my life. I wasn't just learning programming, I was learning how to live again, how to face challenges, and how to seek new opportunities even when everything seemed to be over. I had decided that every day I would spend 4 hours learning programming. It was a commitment I made to myself. 4 hours every day, each afternoon, after finishing the housework, I would sit in the living room, put on my headphones, and open my computer. My notebook was filled with notes, formulas, and explanations I wrote down myself. I didn't just learn from online lessons, but also from the mistakes and challenges I encountered. Learning programming was not easy. But I knew one thing: as long as I learned a little more every day, as long as I persevered, I would achieve what I wanted. And no matter how tough the road was, I would keep going, because I knew every step would lead me to a brighter future. Life isn't easy, and I can't just sit and wait for opportunities to come without doing anything. Although I decided to start learning programming, I still had to face reality. After losing my job and having to start from scratch, I no longer had a stable income. I needed to do something to cover my living expenses, pay bills, take care of my family, and still maintain my passion for programming, so I started driving for Uber. Every morning, I left the house early, cruising through the busy streets of Seattle, picking up all kinds of passengers. Some were friendly, while others just glanced at me through the rearview mirror without saying a word. Even so, this job gave me a chance to think and plan for what I wanted to do when I got home. After each shift, I would return home, have a quick dinner, and then sit back at the computer. By then, I was exhausted. But I couldn't give up. Programming had become a part of my life. Every line of code I typed, every lesson I completed, was a step forward. However, I couldn't shake the feeling of being tired. Sometimes, I wondered if I had the strength to keep going, but when I looked at what I had learned, I saw a light within me. I knew I was doing the right thing, no matter how difficult the path was. And every night, when I sat in front of the computer, I felt closer to my goal. Every day of driving for Uber, every night of studying programming, I knew I was creating a new future for myself. One night, while working on a complicated piece of code, I felt the sleepiness creeping in. My neck began to hurt. And my back ached from sitting too long. I rested my head on my hand and leaned back in the chair, just to take a short break. But just for a moment, then I returned to the screen and continued with the lines of code. Every time I typed a key, I felt like I was exploring a new world, even though my body was exhausted. That time, I dozed off on the keyboard, my neck hurt, my back ached. I told myself I would just rest for a bit, but sometimes, fatigue makes it impossible to stay awake. However, as soon as I woke up, I felt a sense of excitement in my heart. Why? Because I knew that every time I pushed through the pain and exhaustion, I was getting closer to my dream. No matter how tired my body was, my passion still burned. Tired, yes. But my heart was full of enthusiasm. That's why I didn't give up. That's why I kept learning, no matter how late the night stretched on, no matter how early I had to wake up the next morning to drive for Uber. One part of me had changed. The perseverance, the determination to overcome all difficulties, that's what I learned during those months when no one was watching. After several months of learning, I started to feel more confident in my abilities. I was no longer just learning theory, I had begun practicing. The knowledge of programming was no longer just numbers or meaningless commands. It had become tools for me to create useful things, so I started building small projects. The first was a simple note-taking app, where users could save thoughts and to-do lists for the day. I learned how to use databases to store information, how user interfaces worked, and how to optimize the code so the app ran smoothly. Although it was just a small project, it gave me a sense of pride that words couldn't describe. Next, I continued developing a weather website. I learned how to integrate APIs to get weather data from online sources and display it on the user interface. It was an amazing experience to see what I had created actually work. From the basic lessons, I had been able to build useful little tools. However, I knew this was just the beginning. These small projects taught me so much. Every time I completed one, no matter how small, I felt like I was making progress. Every line of code, every new feature, helped me build confidence. And most importantly, I started to realize something. I wasn't just a learner, I was becoming a creator of valuable products. When I first started learning programming, my wife didn't really understand what I was doing. She was worried because she saw me spending so much time learning and neglecting other tasks. A few times, she asked me if I was sure about the path I was choosing. She knew I had failed before, and she didn't want me to fall into a dead-end life again, but gradually, she started to change. One evening, when I was studying, she brought me a cup of coffee and sat next to me, silently opening a book and starting to read. She didn't need to say anything more, her eyes looking at me with understanding. She didn't ask anymore, didn't tell me to stop. She had realized that I wasn't just learning programming. I was fighting with myself to change my life. She didn't just support me with words, but with actions. Every night, she brought me coffee, every night, she sat beside me, though she didn't say anything, but I knew she was there, always there to support me. And that was the greatest strength I had. There was nothing more important than having someone who always believes in you and supports you, even when everything around you may not be easy. After nearly 2 years of studying programming diligently, I began to feel confident enough to look for a real job. But it wasn't easy. I had to face a lot of self-doubt. Would I be able to compete with younger people who had more experience? Could I really get hired by a tech company when I was 52 and didn't have much real-world experience? But I couldn't keep waiting for the opportunity to come. I decided to give it a try. I applied for an internship position as a programmer for a young startup. I didn't have high expectations, I just wanted to see what I could do. The days after submitting the application, I felt anxious and nervous. But I knew that even if I failed, I wouldn't stop. And then, I received an email inviting me for an interview. It was an unbelievable feeling. I had fought with myself to reach that day, and now, I had the chance to prove my abilities. I knew this was just the beginning. When I walked into the company for the first time, I could clearly feel the difference. I was the oldest intern among them, and sometimes I felt like I didn't belong there. But I didn't let doubt and anxiety hold me back. I decided I would work my hardest, not just to prove myself to others, but to prove to myself that I could do this. Even though I was the oldest intern in the company, I was always the first to arrive and the hardest worker. I kept learning, seeking opportunities to improve myself, and always giving my best at work. I knew that, even though I wasn't young anymore, perseverance and determination were things no one could defeat, and it was thanks to that relentless effort that I earned the trust and respect of my colleagues. Although the path wasn't easy, I knew that every day that passed was a step closer to my goal. In the end, age no longer mattered. What mattered was the determination and continuous effort. When the pandemic hit, everything changed in the blink of an eye. Companies had to downsize, and I, once again, found myself facing job loss. This time, there were no excuses like before, not due to restructuring or anything predictable. The pandemic hit like a storm, sweeping everything away, and the company where I worked was no exception, but I didn't feel disappointed or discouraged like before. This time, I had something more valuable: skills. The months I spent diligently learning programming had given me a foundation that no one could take away. I knew I had changed, and I could do things I never dreamed of before. While everyone else was scared, I realized that this was an opportunity. Yes, I lost my job, but this time I wasn't worried about whether I could find a new job. I didn't need to return to old work anymore. I had the skills, and that gave me a strong sense of confidence. Furthermore, I had something else, an idea. This idea came to me like a beam of light in the dark. It was the idea for an app that I believed could change the lives of many people like me, those in their middle age, lost, and unsure where to start over. It was amazing to realize that I could create something not just for myself, but for many others going through the same experience. This was an unexpected turning point, but it was the turning point I needed. When the pandemic occurred, I noticed something strange. I wasn't the only one in this situation. It wasn't just me. There were many others in their middle age, people who had lost their jobs, who were feeling confused and didn't know what to do next. I met them in online chats, listening to them share their struggles in finding new jobs, while their skills were outdated, and they didn't know where to start. At that moment, I clearly realized one thing: I wasn't alone. I wasn't the only one seeking a new direction in life. Middle-aged people who once had stable careers but now had to face a constantly changing technological world were lost, just like I had been. Looking at those people, I understood that they needed something, a tool, a support system, to help them start over. And when I looked at them, I also saw a part of myself in them. This gave me the extra motivation to turn my idea into reality. I wanted to create an app to help people like us, those who had lost their jobs, felt lost, and didn't know where to begin again, find light and hope. This was a project not just for me, but for everyone going through this life with the belief that, no matter how difficult things get, they can start over. With all these thoughts in my mind, I began planning an app that could help adults like me learn the necessary skills in this digital world. I called it Restart, an app that helps middle-aged people relearn new skills, from programming to other digital tools they need to continue their lives and careers. I envisioned that Restart would not just be an ordinary online learning app. It wouldn't just help users learn to use new technology tools, it would also help them regain confidence in themselves. With easy-to-understand lessons, online support from the community, and a friendly interface, Restart would be a place where people could find support and guidance. The name, Restart, wasn't just about starting over, but it carried a powerful message: anyone can start over, it's never too late. And this idea, though new, made me feel like I could change an entire community. That's why I decided to take action on this idea, an idea that could bring great change to those who needed it the most. Although I had learned a lot of programming skills, I knew that to develop an app like Restart, I needed support. So, I began building the project on my own. Step by step, I started designing the interface, writing code, and building the basic features. But I couldn't do everything by myself, and I didn't have enough knowledge to solve all the complex problems. I invited a few old friends, people I knew could help. They all agreed to join. They asked for little more than coffee and a promise to create an app that could change the lives of millions. Though we weren't a professional development team, we had something big companies didn't have: passion and determination. Every night, we gathered, exchanged ideas, shared experiences, and slowly, Restart began to take shape. Each one of us contributed something important, whether it was a word, a small suggestion, or a solution to a difficult problem. Although we didn't have a large budget or the resources of big tech companies, we had the most important thing: the desire to change and improve the lives of others. When I shared my journey on LinkedIn, I didn't expect much. I just wanted to tell my story, a middle-aged man starting over, someone who had failed but never gave up. I wanted to share Restart and hope to get support from the community. To my surprise, my post quickly went viral. My words touched the hearts of thousands. People who had felt lost, those looking for an opportunity to change, found my story and felt encouraged. The post received tens of thousands of shares, and I couldn't believe the support from the community. In a short time, I received many messages and emails from people wanting to join the project, wanting to help me create an app that could help millions. And then, one day, I received an email from a venture fund in San Francisco. They had been following my journey on LinkedIn and were very impressed with the idea of Restart. They wanted to invest in the project. This was a major turning point. From being unemployed, someone with just an idea and perseverance, I now had financial support to make Restart a reality. At that moment, I couldn't believe what I was experiencing. Just a year ago, I still felt stuck, unsure where I was going. And now, I was receiving investment to develop an app that I believed would change the lives of so many. Restart wasn't just a tech project, it was a movement, a symbol of perseverance and hope, after 2 years of hard work. Restart is no longer just an abstract idea. It has become a real application, helping millions of people around the world, mostly Americans aged 40 and over, who once felt left behind in the modern tech world. This is a success I never could have imagined when I was unemployed, sitting next to a cold cup of coffee, thinking about the next phase of my life. The development of Restart was not a coincidence. It came from relentless efforts, from the countless hours my team and I spent developing, testing, and improving the app. From those late nights when I worked alone in my living room, to the time when we finally had a team of developers, marketers, and other support staff. Each one of us shared the same goal, to help people like us, who once felt they had no opportunities left. Looking at the over 2 million users of Restart, I don't just see a number. I see stories, lives that have been changed because they learned new skills and were equipped to move forward. I realize that I'm not just running an app, I'm leading a movement that helps adults feel like they can start over, learn, and grow. I remember the days when I felt like I had failed, when I thought I had no opportunities left. But now, I can see the hope in the eyes of my users. And that's the greatest motivation for me to keep pushing forward, so that Restart not only helps, but inspires even more people. At first, I never imagined I would become a CEO. I was just a 50-year-old learning programming, with very little experience in running a business. But life has a way of taking us places we never predicted, and I've reached this position not because I was the best, but because I understood what it feels like to be left behind. I understand that feeling, the feeling of not being young or quick-witted like younger colleagues, the feeling of being rejected, forgotten. I once felt that I had no value. No opportunities. And those feelings helped shape me into a CEO who is empathetic, who listens, and cares for those around me. I am not a person with extraordinary talent or a brilliant business strategy from the start. But I know how to inspire those around me, how to build a united, passionate team. I understand that to build a successful company, it's not just about having skilled people, but also about having a vision and belief in what you're doing. For me, being CEO is not the most important thing. What matters more is that I can help those who once felt left behind, just like I did. That's why I want to be the leader of Restart, not because I'm the best, but because I'm the one who can empathize and understand what they're going through. One of the biggest decisions my team and I made was to expand the office back to Seattle, the place where I once sat, feeling unemployed and hopeless. It's hard to describe the feeling when I stood in front of my office, a place where I once thought I would never have the chance to return. This wasn't just an office, it was a symbol of change, of starting over after failure. Seattle is where I have so many memories. Both good and bad. It's where I once drove Uber to make a living, where I felt I had no place in society. But now, Seattle is the place where I can stand firm, where I can see a bright future, not just for myself, but for others as well. When we opened the office in Seattle, I didn't just see a business opportunity, I saw a revival. From an unemployed person, from someone who felt they had no value, I was now able to return here as a CEO, leading a growing company. And I never forget to remind myself that, no matter how difficult things get, persistence and belief in oneself will help us overcome any challenge. One day, during a recruitment process for a developer position, I met a candidate I never expected. When he walked into the interview room, I recognized him. He was one of the people who had mocked me, laughed at me when I started learning programming. He didn't recognize me, but I could never forget him. His criticisms, his condescending looks when I started learning programming, had become a part of my memory that I always carried with me. But now, as he sat before me, I didn't feel anger or the desire for revenge. I only felt calmness, a sense of gratitude that he had been a part of my journey. He was awkward, lowering his head and looking embarrassed. I could feel his anxiety in his eyes. But I just smiled and said to him, "I've been in your position." My words weren't just a formality, they were a confirmation that I understood him. I knew what he was going through. I decided to hire him, not because I felt generous or wanted to show forgiveness, but because I believed that everyone deserves a second chance. Even though he had mocked me before, even though he once thought I couldn't succeed, now he was a candidate with the ability and passion to work at Restart. Life is like that, anyone can make mistakes, and anyone can fix those mistakes. I believe people can change if they have the right opportunity and support. And I want to be the one to give him that chance, as well as many others. We can't live in the past, we must move forward, view things with an open mind, and be ready to help those around us. When I invited him to work with us, I wasn't just giving him a job, I was giving him the chance to prove that, no matter what his past was like, he could change and become part of the future. If you had asked me a few years ago, I definitely wouldn't have thought I would be standing here, sharing this story with you. When I turned 50, I felt like someone whose time had passed, like a book that had already been read, with nothing left to explore. I thought my life had settled into a routine. And the years ahead would just be quiet, uneventful days. But now, I realize something important. Life doesn't end at 50, it's actually when I began to truly live. When I was laid off and faced an uncertain future, I felt confused and scared. But that failure led me down a new path, a path I had never imagined. It was a journey of rediscovering myself, starting from scratch, learning new things, and developing skills I never thought I could acquire. That was when I truly began to live. Life is not about what you've done before, but about what you will do in the future. Don't let age stop you. Don't let the decisions of the past define your future. Whenever you decide to make a change, you can start over, and that's when real life begins. You still have plenty of time ahead, as long as you're willing to learn and never give up. Throughout my journey of learning programming, I faced many challenges. There were days when I felt like I would never understand the complex lines of code or the technical terms I had never heard of. There were times when I felt lost in a world I couldn't keep up with. But what I realized is that I didn't need to be the best programmer. What mattered most was that I never gave up. My journey isn't a story of perfection. It's a story of perseverance. Every day, I told myself that if I kept learning, I would gradually get better. I didn't need to be the best, I just needed to be the most persistent. And that's exactly what I did. Every day, I kept going, no matter how many challenges or failures I faced. I kept going, and slowly, I got to where I wanted to be. Life isn't always easy, and you won't always feel like the best. But if you have enough perseverance, you'll find that you can overcome any challenge. Every step, no matter how small, takes you closer to your final destination. And if you never give up, you'll achieve things you never thought possible. Even though I've become the CEO of a company with over 2 million users, I still maintain the habit I started back when I first learned programming. Every morning, I wake up at 6 a.m., sit down by my laptop, and continue learning. I never stop learning, never think I've reached the top and don't need to learn anymore. No matter how successful I become, I always keep the mindset of someone who's starting over. For me, learning isn't just a process, it's a way of life. I never think I know enough. Every day, I seek out new things, new technologies, new ideas to improve my work and life. That's why I still feel like a beginner, always ready to learn and change, and the most important lesson I've learned is, life isn't about what you've done before, it's about what you're doing right now. Every day is an opportunity to become a better version of yourself. And if you keep the spirit of learning, you will never stop growing. I know there are many people who feel too old to start something new. I understand that feeling because I've been there. When I started learning programming at 50, I felt it was too late to enter a tech field that seemed to be only for young people. But I want to tell you, it's never too late. Age doesn't matter. What matters is your attitude and perseverance. Nothing can stop you if you're truly determined. The world today is changing so quickly, and there are so many new opportunities for those who dare to think differently and act on it. You're not the only one who feels too old, but if you don't try, you'll never know how far you can go. Remember, no one can predict the future. If you don't start today, you'll never have the chance to change your life. Believe in yourself and start now. You have plenty of time to shape your future. I still remember the mocking laughter I had to endure when I started learning programming. The criticism, the sneering looks from friends and colleagues used to hurt me. But now, when I look back, I realize that those very laughs became the motivation that helped me get this far. Those laughs no longer hurt me. In fact, they made me stronger. They remind me of the struggles and challenges I've overcome. Every time I felt tired, every time I wanted to give up, I remembered those laughs and told myself that I would prove to them that I could do it. Life will sometimes throw difficulties and injustices your way. But instead of letting them defeat you, use them as fuel to move forward. If you can turn criticism into motivation, you'll never feel defeated. If someone asked me the secret to success, I wouldn't talk about business strategies or long-term plans. I would simply say one thing: just start, even if it's just a simple line of code. Everything starts with small steps. Big successes don't come overnight, they're the result of consistent efforts, one step at a time. You don't need to have everything figured out from the start, you just need to begin. Don't wait until you feel perfect, don't wait until you have all the skills. Start now, even if it's just a small step, a small decision. And from there, everything will slowly unfold. Life is about starting. Start today, and you'll be amazed at what you can achieve in the future. Thank you for listening to my story. I hope these insights help you realize that it's never too late to start again, and that you can overcome any challenge if you don't give up. If you found this story inspiring and want to hear more stories like it, don't forget to subscribe to the Gentle Heart Stories channel. We'll always be here, with you on your journey of change and personal growth. Thank you again, and I wish you strength on your own path.